Hi, I'm Pastor Kevin Wilfley with the Upper Columbia Conference Prayer Ministries. It's a real privilege for me to introduce to you another prayer story, another answer to prayer. In just a moment, I'm going to have Alan and Jane Williams come and tell you their story. But I wanted to remind you first of a really special text here in the book of Luke, chapter 18. It says, "Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and never give up." Being consistent in prayer and refusing to give up in prayer seems to be one of the ways by which many answers to prayer come to us. And it's a real honor for me to have this really special couple come and tell you their story of how persistence in prayer led to the conversion of Alan Williams.
I actually grew up also with a Catholic background, and in my home there were 5 siblings, and my father was not a Catholic, but he had married a Catholic, and he was very, very committed to raising his family in the Catholic faith. And so we went to church and Christian schools, Catholic schools, from the time of kindergarten, in my case all the way through college. So we had a very strong background.
I was raised in a Seventh-day Adventist, I have Seventh-day Adventist background. My mother was a Seventh-day Adventist, but my dad wasn't. And so as I grew up and got a little older, when all the men went on hunting and fishing trips and the women went to church, it didn't take me long to decide I'd rather go with the men. And it was very easy at that time. I just faded away from the church and felt that there wasn't anything really there for me, and it was very easy to fall away. And in my orthotic practice, I met Jane's young son and Jane, and I said I never dated anyone I dealt with professionally, and I only broke that rule once. And Jane and I got married. I knew Jane was Catholic, but she seemed like a very Christian Catholic, and I knew she had good, strong values, and I was impressed with that. And I was even told her I would submit to the authority of the Catholic Church so that our wedding and our marriage was right with God. And I made some promises that I wasn't sure I knew what I was doing at the time, but we went through all of the Catholic counseling prior to marriage, and I just would go to church with her intermittently. I didn't go all the time, but I did go a little bit, and especially around the holidays.
So we talked in kind of generalities, I would say. We talked about how important God was and how important Jesus was. And we talked about the idea of not wanting to be unequally yoked, because we wanted to make sure that Christ was the center of a relationship. And I must say I was most impressed with Alan because he could quote the Bible like nobody I ever heard. And he lived and worked for what he identified as a Christian organization, a Christian business, and they had Christian ethics, and I also was most impressed by that. So those 2 things, and the fact that he wanted to be a godly husband, really are what attracted my attention and caused me to be interested in Alan and to fall in love with him. So we got married, and life quickly turned from my perspective, because he really wasn't very interested in pursuing our spiritual side of our relationship. And I found him to be, he was very worldly and somewhat angry in terms of how he addressed life situations. And so I prayed for Alan. I prayed that he would have a change of heart and get to know Jesus as his personal Savior. And so that went on. I took that approach probably about 7 years into our marriage. And so I prayed for him then again with that kind of an approach for about 7 years. And during that time, God would often remind me that though his timing wasn't my timing, he was listening to me. He would respond to maybe little smaller prayers in the way that I knew that he was listening. And then eventually, we had an experience where some old friends of Alan's from his church experience at Countryside actually called us. And this always makes me think about Pastor Kevin's message about how important friends are and how important it is for friends to reach out to friends. Because they contacted us and invited us to go to dinner, and I'd never met them. And they were asking us to go to dinner kind of in response to some things that Alan had done for them on their trip to Guatemala for Water for Life. And so as we had our meeting with them that night, I watched Alan change in terms of his conviction and his interest in looking back towards the church. He was so impressed with their commitment and their steadfast relationship with Christ over all those years. And you know, it's funny, I mean, you say, well, what really changed? What happened? Well, in my mind, that was a significant event. And after that, Alan began to talk about his need to go back to the church.
And so I asked Jane in the spring of '07, I said, would you be interested in going back and visiting an Adventist church? And because of her Christian background, worship and worship services are not something she's at all opposed to, so she said she'd be happy to. So we planned a Friday night, or we planned to go on a Friday night to church the next day. And when Jane came home that night, for whatever reason, I didn't turn the TV on. I just wanted to talk and converse about what was going to happen when we went to church the next day. And we got up and we drove out to the little Countryside church. And when we got there, it just, I can't explain how I felt. The Holy Spirit was really working on my heart. And that day, it was the beginning of the second quarter of 2007. In fact, it was the second week of the second quarter. And so they still had quarterlies sitting in the windowsill in the Sabbath school class that we visited. And so I just picked up 2 quarterlies and brought them home. And when I got home, I showed these to Jane. I said, Jane, this is what they do. I said, they study these quarterlies all week, and then they come back to church the next Sabbath and they all discuss the quarterly. And I said, you can go visit any church anywhere and it'll be the same subject. And she goes, well, maybe we should study them together. I took Jane's hand that night and I looked her in the eye, and it was May the 22nd, 2007, and I said, Jane, this is going to be huge. And I didn't know how huge it was going to be either, and I'm sure Jane didn't, but I just bowed my head and I said, Lord, I feel like I'm receiving a loud cry. And I said, I don't even know if I want to do this, but I do know this, I cannot do it on my own. I need your help. And I just pray that if this is what you want me to do, that you'll help me. And I went out to the garage after where my favorite hiding place was, and I emptied out all the beer that was out there and threw away the last pack of cigarettes that was out there. And I got up the next morning and went to work, and I haven't had a cigarette or a beer or a cup of coffee since, and the Lord gave me complete victory over that.
Eventually, when I gave it to God and I started to pray for a change of heart, I had a sense of peace that, again, is hard to describe, because I knew that God would handle it. I knew that He was in charge. I just didn't know what the outcome would be, and I didn't know what the timing would be. And so, but I had a sense of peace, again, that He was in charge. And you know, several people have said to me, boy, you didn't know what you were praying for, did you? But I really did. I really, truly was praying that Alan would have a personal relationship with Jesus, whatever that meant. I really didn't think about denomination. I just wanted him to have a personal relationship because I valued my personal relationship, and I wanted him to have the same.